Now that you know the basics of working with objects and their properties, in this video, we're going to figure out how objects work with functions. We're going to explore how we can pass objects in as function arguments, and we're going to figure out how we can return objects from our functions. To kick things off, let's make a new file for this video. In the objects directory, I'm going to call this one objects-functions.js. And in the objects functions file, we're going to start with a book. I'm actually just going to copy the myBook object from the last video over to the new file. Then I'm going to create a second book by hitting enter a couple of times and pasting the book again. Now, all of the books in our fictitious application, they're going to have the same properties. All books have titles, all books have authors and page counts. It's not the properties that are going to change between the individual books, it's the values for those properties. So for this second book, let's change the variable name from myBook to otherbook, and let's change those property values. So the title is no longer going to be 1984. For this one, let's use A People's History of the United States by Howard Zinn, and I'm just going to shorten that to A People's History. Now we also want to swap out the author. No longer is the author of this particular book George Orwell. It is now Howard Zinn, and the page count goes from 326 to 723. And now we have two individual instances of a book. All of them have the same properties. It is the values for those properties that differ. Now let's say we want to print that summary for all of the books I have. So we want to print the little message, the title, followed by the author. To do that, I would have to add a console.log for every book in my collection. This is going to create code that's duplicated over and over again. Instead of duplicating the code and writing a bunch of console.log statements, we're just going to create a function that accepts a book. It's then going to be able to use the book's properties to generate that message, which means we'll just have one console.log instead of one for every book. Down below, let's see what this is going to look like. We're going to make a function, and for now, I'll just call this one getSummary. We'll set it equal to a function, and this function is going to take just a single argument. So instead of needing to pass in title, author, page count, and everything else, we can just pass in the object because the object contains all of those values as object properties. Right here, that means we can accept just one argument in the object, and I'll call this book for our function. So how are we going to get access to book? Well, we're just going to call getSummary with the individual objects that we want to print the summary for, which means that down below, I can call getSummary with myBook, and I can call getSummary with otherbook. In each case, I'm passing a book into the function, and now inside of the function, we can add the code that does whatever we're trying to do. In our case, we're trying to print that little message for the moment. Console.log, printing right here inside of template strings. We start with the book's title, book.title, then the word by, then the author, book.author. Excellent. We're able to pull both title and author off of book. Book is an object with those two properties. You'll notice I'm not directly referencing myBook or otherbook. If I did, this function wouldn't be reusable because it would always be referring to the same book. But by just referencing the argument, the function is reusable. I can call it with as many different books as I like. Now let's go ahead and make sure all of this actually works by saving the file and running it from the terminal. Over here, node objects-functions.js. I'm going to execute the file. I get 1984 by George Orwell and A People's History by Howard Zinn. This is fantastic. We were able to use this one line and do something for every single book that we have in the program. Now that you know how to pass an object into a function, let's figure out how we can return an object from a function. Now, why might you want to do that? Well, there are a lot of different reasons, but one good one is to be able to return multiple values. Right now, all of our return statements return just a single thing. For example, we return a single number, a single string, and in this case, a single string as well. If I want to return 2 strings, for example, or a string and 3 numbers, there's no good way to do that. But if we return an object, we can just add 3 properties onto it, and that's going to allow us to send back as many values as we like. Let's see what that would look like. Right here, we're going to add a return statement, and we're going to return an object. Now, yes, we could put that object on a variable up above and then use return with that variable name, but we could just also define it right in line, which is what I'm going to do right here. Now let's say we want to return two variations on that book summary. I'm going to call this one summary, and I'm going to set it equal to the summary that we just generated. So I'll copy it and paste it up above. Then I'm going to add on a second property, a summary that includes that page count. Let's toss a comma on that line and then add right here, page count summary. I'm going to set it equal to, this is going to be a template string with a different message. We'll start off with the book's title, book.title. Then we're going to talk about how long it is followed by the page count. So right here, that would be book.page count. And then after the page count, we'll just add pages long. So for this book, my book, it would say 1984 is 326 pages long. So using this object, we're able to return both variations of the summary from a single function. Now we can remove the console.log and figure out how this is actually going to work. Down below, this code isn't really going to do anything. Yes, it's going to execute the function, but we no longer have a console.log in the function, which means that we have to do something with the return values coming back. That's where the object lives that has our two summaries we can use. On this line, for example, I could say let book summary equal, and then I could do the same thing for the other one, let other book summary equal, and then we could do something with those summaries. So I could use console.log to print, for example, book summary dot page count summary. So we know that what comes back from get summary is an object, which means that book summary is an object. And in this case, we're just using dot notation to grab one of its properties. We can grab either summary or page count summary. I'm grabbing the latter. Now let's rerun the file and make sure we do get that message. I rerun things and I get 1984 is 326 pages long. So there we have it. By returning objects from functions, we're able to pass back multiple values, in this case, two strings, something that wouldn't have been possible otherwise. Now that we know how to pass objects into functions and how to get objects back from functions, let's move on to a little challenge. So down below, I'm going to create a challenge area where you're going to have to create a function that returns an object. Your challenge for this video is going to be pretty similar to what we did over in Functions 101, where you created convert Fahrenheit to Celsius. Though instead of just converting from one to the other and returning a single number, you're going to pass in Fahrenheit and you're going to convert it to both Celsius and Kelvin, returning an object that contains all three temperatures. So down below, create function, take Fahrenheit in, and then you're going to return an object with all three. So you're going to return an object with Fahrenheit, whatever was passed in, with the converted Celsius value, and with the converted Kelvin value. If you forget the formulas, you should have all of them over in the basics directory. We have that temp conversion file that contains the two conversion formulas required. So take some time to create this function that returns an object with all three numbers on it, then actually call the function and dump the object to the console to make sure it has the properties showing up correctly. Pause the video, knock this one out, and when you're done, come back and click play. All right, how'd that one go? I'm going to kick things off by making my function. Let convert Fahrenheit equal a function. We're going to take in just a single argument. This is just going to be a number of the temperature in Fahrenheit. And we're going to return an object. So inside of the function, you needed to use return. You needed to create a new object, and you needed to add on those three properties, Fahrenheit, Kelvin, and Celsius. Let's start off with Fahrenheit. That one's pretty easy. The Fahrenheit property gets its value from the Fahrenheit argument defined up above. Then a comma enter for the other property. The next one we can do is Kelvin. Kelvin is going to equal, right here, we're going to have the formula we had before. In parentheses, we take the Fahrenheit value, we add on 459.67 degrees, and then we take that and we multiply it by, in parentheses, 5 divided by 9. This is the exact same formula we had before. The last property we're going to add on to this object is going to be the temperature in Celsius. So comma, enter Celsius. Right here, we add that formula into the mix. This time, in parentheses, it's Fahrenheit minus 32. We take the result of that operation and we multiply it by the result of, in parentheses, 5/9. Excellent. And now we have an object that's actually returning all three values, and we can call the function. I'm going to use convert Fahrenheit. I am going to pass in a value. Let's use 74 degrees. And then I'm going to do something with the object. So I could say let temps equal, and then down below on the next line, I could just console.log temps, or I could have used dot notation to pull off a single value. For this case, though, this is going to get the job done. Let's save the file and rerun things over from the terminal. I'm going to rerun the script, and what do I get? I get my object back, and I have my temperatures. From 74 degrees, we go to 296 Kelvin and 23 Celsius, which is indeed correct. And there we have it. We have a good system for passing objects into functions and for returning objects from functions. This is going to make our function arguments a little cleaner. We can pass in just a single value instead of many values, and it's going to allow us to return multiple values, something we weren't able to do before. That is it for this video. We're going to continue learning about objects in the next one, so stay tuned, and I will see you then.